After the Apollo 13 incident and waning public interest after the space race was won, Apollo 17 was the end of an era. It was the last human mission to send astronauts to the moon, and since then, no humans have ventured beyond low Earth orbit. For one final time, the Saturn V lit up with 7.6 million pounds of thrust, hurtling a crew of 3 to a destination in the moon called Taurus Littrow. Astronauts Gene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt would go on to spend 3 days on the lunar surface, breaking the record for longest time spent on the moon.
And a final word from the last man on the moon.
I'd like to just let what I believe history will record, that America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow. And as we leave the moon in Taurus Littrow, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return, with peace and hope for all mankind. Godspeed to crew of Apollo 17.
My fellow Americans, this day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country. At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our Space Shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors. Guided by clear objectives, today we set a new course for America's space program.
It's been more than 35 years since humans last walked on the lunar surface. And now, with a vision for space exploration, our nation aims to return astronauts to the moon, continue on to Mars, and then keep going to points beyond.
The vision for space exploration gave NASA a new sense of mission, a new sense of focus, and clear objectives. It would begin with the space shuttle returning to flight as soon as possible, and from there on, the shuttle's main and only objective was to complete the International Space Station. And after over 30 years of service, the shuttle was to be retired by 2010, and in its place, new rockets and spacecraft were to be developed. This included a new crew exploration vehicle that looked pretty similar to the Apollo spacecraft, only larger and equipped with more advanced, modern 21st century systems. The Crew Exploration Vehicle, or CEV, was to fly on a new rocket called the Crewed Launch Vehicle, or CLV. The CLV was designed to carry the CEV to low Earth orbit, where it would dock with the International Space Station and carry astronauts to space as early as 2014. But to take astronauts beyond low Earth orbit, to destinations such as the Moon, Mars, and beyond, a larger rocket designed to carry heavy cargo would be developed, and this rocket would be used to launch the Lunar Lander, also known as LSAM, the Lunar Surface Access Module. LSAM and CEV would dock in low Earth orbit, and the second stage of the large rocket would propel them to the moon. The first landing with this new architecture was to occur no later than 2020. The goal was to have astronauts spend long periods of time on the moon, much longer than Apollo, which could only do it for a maximum 3 days. These long adventures on the moon were to be used to prepare for future expeditions to Mars. In these early stages of planning, With the vision for space exploration, anything seemed possible, but questions of feasibility and implementation had yet to be answered. Senators gather to ask the NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe on how he plans to implement the vision for space exploration.
2 days ago, the Congressional Budget Office estimated that the deficit in fiscal year 2004 would reach $477 billion. It's been reported that the President's new proposal could cost between $170 billion and $600 billion. Needless to say, the $12 billion that the administration has suggested to be spent over the next 5 years falls far, far short of what might be required to actually return to the moon and reach for Mars and beyond.
Among the faces in the hearing is future NASA Administrator Bill Nelson.
How you can do that. I think my other concern is I would not like to see repeated the period of time between 1975 and 1981 when we were down and not flying with humans. My concern in what you've outlined and what the President outlined in the speech over at NASA headquarters is that you phase out the space shuttle by 2010, and then if we don't fly this new vehicle until 4, 5, 6 years later, that means that our only human access to space is that we've got to rely on Russian rockets and European rockets, and I don't think that's good for the country.
6, 5, 3 engines up and burning. 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery, beginning America's new journey to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And the vehicle has cleared the tower.
Northeast of the launch pad. Booster officer confirms clean separation of the solid rocket boosters. Discovery now on its 3 main engines, second stage.
As NASA enters its 6th decade, it's time to go back to the moon. This time we'll go back not just for a few hours, not for a few days, but for good. For the good of exploration, innovation, and inspiration. For the good of humanity.
As the fledgling constellation program develops, the spacecraft is named Orion. The rocket is renamed Ares I and Ares V, and the lander is named Altair.
A new generation of moon machines is being built and tested. Many of the new designs are directly descended from Apollo hardware, including the lunar lander. Engineers are eager to hear from the man who flew the first one to land.
And I don't know exactly where this CG is and so on, but sometimes the amount of motion that you get at the cockpit is different than the amount that the footpads are seeing by a substantial margin. And you have to get a sense of that to know how careful you have to be up on top to make sure the bottom is doing the right thing.
Each individual component of the constellation program is developed and tested individually before being put together. Unlike the space shuttle, the constellation program would begin with uncrewed test flights. Similar to the suborbital Saturn I tests of the Apollo era, the first test flights of the constellation era would be suborbital.